Hello and welcome to this episode of the Corporate Escapists TV show and podcast. I am your host, Christine Innes, and all the way from the other side of the world, we have the amazing Evan joining us today. Welcome so much for being here, Evan.
Thank you very, very much for having me. It's always exciting connecting with someone thousands and thousands of miles away.
I know you gotta love technology. I mean,
Right.
what would we look? I remember the days when we didn't have mobile phones, so that's showing my age. So,
Hey,
but
I do too, barely, but I do too.
But yeah, look, I've got so much I really want to dive into today with you because I know that you're an expert in so many different things. And I want to share a little bit about your story as well. But I'm going to hand it over to you, get you to introduce yourself to the audience, and then we'll sit down and have an amazing chat.
Hey, that works out for me. So I'm Evan, like you said, and I host the podcast Path to Podcast Success, which I was very happy to have you on as well. And outside of the podcast, I still work with podcasts. I have a business, editing and producing podcasts for other entrepreneurs, a podcast production agency. My team and I work with podcasters and entrepreneurs to start and maintain podcasts, doing all the editing and production work so that they can show up and record and do nothing else. So that is just my little blurb about me and what I do.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm super passionate about podcasts. I mean, honestly, I think every business owner should have a podcast, and it's the easiest way for you to connect to your audience, and B, it's a great way for you to get content. Like, what are your thoughts on that as well?
I wholeheartedly agree because I've always thought this. Now, of course, I may be a little bit biased, but I believe it. I've always liked podcasting more than the other forms of content creation you see out there. Like, what are the main ones, right? You got copywriting, like posting and blog posts and things of that nature. You have videos, and then you have podcasts. All of them are important, but I find podcasting to be a little bit more intimate, I think is a good word for it. Like if you're listening to a podcast and you listen to it enough, it almost feels like you kind of know the host. If you listen to podcasts at all, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But you can't get that as much from video or from a blog post. I mean, from a blog post, and again, all valuable, but from a blog post, for all you know, a ghostwriter could have written it. And then from a video, no matter what, when you're in front of the camera, there's always a little part of you that's on, that you're putting on a little bit of a persona at least. But podcasting, I find, is amazing at really just getting the real you. And so that's one of the reasons why I love it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the Corporate Escapers, where like obviously my mission is to inspire people through the power of stories. And stories are just so important. And I think everyone forgets that, we don't have to have like a sad story or, like some big grand story, but every story that we share, we really make an impact. And I think that's one of the key things that we can do in a podcast, like you said, is to be really raw, authentic, and share those stories because you never know who you're going to inspire.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. There is a lot of power in that, and when you see those downloads, when you see those numbers going up, I mean, even if
Mm.
you're at the beginning, you have a few hundred, few thousand downloads, whatever. Put yourself in a room with however many people, it shows. That's still going to be a good amount of people, and at least one of those people, I'm sure, was impacted in a really powerful way from listening to the podcast. And I feel like a lot of people don't think about that.
I love that. I'm gonna have to use that because it's really like it is really true. Like we look at numbers, and I guess like in this sort of social media world that we're in, where we're driven by numbers, but sometimes we forget that one or two or five, that's individual people.
Oh
And
yeah.
like you said, put them in a room. I actually think that is like magic. Like we're done. Like the interview's done. So we'll just take that.
Oh yeah.
So
No, hey, that's I always try to make sure I always remind myself to not look at people as just numbers on a list. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And that's one of the ways I can find myself remembering that is by thinking, all right, well, put myself in a room with all these people. Like that's a lot of people, and each one of those people is different, and they are
Mm.
people, not just numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you find that, like, obviously, having your own podcast, has that changed the way that you are now more open and willing to share parts of your story and part of yourself?
Yes, I'd say hosting a podcast was probably one of the most impactful things I've ever done just for myself and just how I live my own life and who I am as a person because when I was growing up, I was very introverted. I was very shy. It was always the scariest thing ever if I was called on a class in school, having to share
Mm.
something in front of everyone else. Like I was always very, very introverted and very shy, like I said. However, after podcasting for a good couple of years, I have definitely over 200 podcast episodes out. I honestly now classify myself as more of an extrovert than an introvert. And things change over time, right? But I think the podcasting was one of the main things that caused that to happen, and as a result, of course, now I'm completely open. I share everything about myself, and I think the podcast really helped do that because it's sink or swim. You know, I mean, when you interview that many people, when you have to meet a new person over 200 times and guide them through a conversation with you, a productive conversation, then either you're going to get comfortable with it or you're not. And so I chose to get comfortable with it.
Yeah. I love the saying, be comfortable with being uncomfortable because I think as human beings, we're so used to sitting in our comfort zone. We're so used to, just doing the norm, like everything that we've just done as a routine. But when you can actually put yourself in that uncomfortable situation and be comfortable with it, because know that you're learning personally, you're learning, for your business, I think that that's when the real growth happens, both personally and also for your business as well.
Yes, exactly. You have to be able to put yourself outside your comfort zone a little bit. But then eventually, I mean, your comfort zone expands. Podcasting, when I first started, was not inside my comfort zone. I hated the way I sounded on recordings. I hated
Mm-hmm.
recording. I hated putting myself out there. But now recording a podcast is well within my comfort zone. There's nothing about it that's scary to me anymore.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I remember the first time getting on camera, I was literally sweating everywhere. Like it was just disgusting. I was just like, oh my goodness, like I didn't know what to say. But now I just get on camera, like makeup, no makeup, anything. Like it just doesn't bother me because
Oh
you
yeah,
you
and you're
you're
ready
so
to rock and
comfortable.
roll.
Yeah, that's right. What has been like obviously, moving from being like starting a podcast, but also now having a business helping people, like obviously you've been able to really relate to some of the things that we go through, the challenges, and a lot of it is also confidence with doing that. What have you been able to now be able to show your clients from hosting your own podcast to now helping entrepreneurs with getting their podcast?
Oh yeah. Well, the business actually came first. I started doing this back when I was in high school because my mom has been an entrepreneur for pretty much my entire life. Saw me when I was in high school wanting some extra cash, and so she asked me if she taught me how to edit her podcast and she paid me a little bit of money to do it, would I do it? And I said yes, so I did that. And then she encouraged me to take that and turn it into a real business with real clients because your mom does not count really as a client, unfortunately. But I grow that and expanded that, and then graduated high school and everything, and started living my life, and that's when I realized I needed to practice what I preach, and so then I started the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And so to answer your question, having my own podcast, hosting my own podcast, and having gone through the whole process myself has given me a really, really good foundation to actually help my clients in a really positive and powerful way throughout the setup process and just hosting a podcast, right? Because now I do actually have experience. I have a lot of experience now, more experience than my clients typically, right? If I'm helping someone start a podcast from scratch, and so I can draw on that to help them kind of stay calm through the process. Because I mean, it is scary. Someone starting it, right? And if they don't have any experience in it, if they're starting up a new podcast, it's definitely a little bit scary. And so I can help them through that process, and I find my like the maybe a little bit of the confidence rubs off, hopefully, and it's really just to practice what your pre-situation, and that's what
Mm.
every business owner should be thinking about. I would never hire a coach that has not hired a coach themselves. I would not hire an overweight fitness instructor. And I would not hire a broke financial manager. I mean, I probably wouldn't want to hire a podcast editor who has no actual experience podcasting. So, if that answers your question, that's kind of how that's helped me impact my clients.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I'm big agreement with that. I think, I always say to people, I've got the hardest MBA that you'll ever get because I went through the school of life. So, like I've been through so many different things. And I think that really helps set you apart because when you've been able to, like you said, practice like what you preach, you give such a different depth to your knowledge as well. And then you can actually, when these sort of those moments that happen that, make it a little bit challenging, or we get that scared, nervous, our confidence dips, then you can come in and show them because you've already had experience in that aspect as well.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I think it's just being able to actually come from a place of experience can help more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. What has it been like you having a business obviously during COVID? I know that so many people had to pivot and change, but did you see a change in how you had to do business during that time?
The funny thing is, for me, no. I was doing all of the COVID related stuff way before it was cool. I was on Zoom before it was cool, and I was working online before it was cool. Because I have clients all over the world. That's how I could do that when I was, in high school. I wasn't gonna be doing little like cheap stuff for just the neighborhood businesses. I wanted legit clients with legit businesses and legit money too, because it's a legit business, right?
Mm,
I want to be able to make a positive impact. To do that, you need money. You also need money to live, and I don't
mm,
think there's anything wrong with wanting money. In addition to wanting to make an impact and doing that, all of that, in a really positive
mm,
way. So for me, honestly, not really. Pretty
mm,
everything. It was maybe the this says I needed to rework my life a little bit generally, but it was honestly a pretty seamless transition into COVID. I already
mm.
worked from home, worked for myself, worked online.
Yeah.
That's what everybody else started doing too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the big thing too is that so many people had thought that we've needed to really, step outside, think outside the box. But a lot of the things that, COVID taught us is we actually already had the resources. Like we already had the technology available to us to literally change the way that we do
Oh yeah.
business. We just didn't realize the full advantage of what those sort of systems or
Yeah.
suites sort of offered to us as well.
And it could very well be because I am young at the time of recording this I'm 24. But when I started my business, when I started kind of dip my toe into this whole world, I was like 17, 16, something like that. And
Yeah.
so I never experienced anything else. I didn't have to make a transition into the digital world because all that is all I had
Mm,
ever known in when it comes to business. I mean, I definitely did grow up where it was, Windows 98 was the forefront of the technology at the time. But when I started actually having enough intelligence to use technology, we were at the first iPhones. We were on our way, and by the
mm,
time 2016, 2017 rolled around, all the tools were there. I didn't have to get uncomfortable with transitioning to the online world because that was already within my comfort zone. That's what I had always known up to that point. So it's pretty easy for me, but I definitely understand that that was not the case for many others.
yes,
Because it's
yes,
always
definitely.
making a change, especially in business, not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's crazy because you're actually younger than my son. So it's so funny. Like when you go, grew up with all technology. My son just like keeps reminding me, go, oh, mum, you're still old school. And I'm like going, yeah, I know I'm still old school. Like I still love like writing lists and, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, like one of the key things I would love to find out from you is
Hmm.
like where do you see podcasts going in the next sort of like 2 to 5 years?
I've been asked this question before, and I've been asked questions similar, like, oh, is this something that's going to stick around, or like, what's the goal here, right? What's the plan? A lot of people might think it's a fad, right, or something that's not going to be around for very long, or it'll come and go. No, podcasting, I'm very confident in saying this, is here to stay in the same way that blogs came and stayed, and YouTube and posting video content came and stayed, and that is podcasting as well. It is now one of the main content creation mediums. Like I said, you got podcasting. That's pretty much, it's the new radio, really. And
Mm,
then you have video, and then you have written content. And podcasting is the audio version of mainstream content now. And I know that this is true because it has been around for years. People began starting podcasts well over a decade ago, and there's absolutely no sign of that slowing down whatsoever. And so, as 2 to 5 years from now, there's going to be, I'm sure, many, 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 many thousands more podcasts that exist. Of course, how many of those have a lot of episodes in them. I'm not sure because right now I think the statistic is something crazy like 70 or 90% of podcasts have 10 or less episodes.
Mm,
So, despite podcasting being, here to stay, it is definitely the newest of all of them, right? I mean, how long has a video been around? Long
mm,
time. How long has the written word been around? Quite a long time. But how long have podcasts been around? Not that long compared to that.
mm,
And so if you're in that 10% where you have more than 10 episodes, then you are one of the proud few. So
mm.
there's going to be more people taking advantage of this, I think, in the next 2, 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
And we're still kind of relatively close to like the ground floor of it. So I definitely try to encourage more people to dive in and help make that reality our reality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I've just created a 4 week podcast course, like how to launch it. And it's very much like, let's just get it done. Um, because what I have found is that having a podcast is also part of your legacy. So you can either use it as your legacy for you personally or part of your business as well. Because like you said, it's you, it's, you showing up and sharing. And, what are your thoughts on it, like a podcast being part of your legacy?
I think that is a really cool way to look at it because unless you go in and delete the podcast, and even if you do, I'm sure some people have it downloaded out there somewhere.
Yeah.
So if you record a podcast episode, I mean, it exists for as long as humanity exists.
Mm,
It's pretty safe to assume. And the more you do it, the harder it is to kind of erase all of that. And so it's out there. And,
yeah.
and, and it's you. And like I said before, I do believe a podcast is the best way to get across the real you as opposed to, like I said, a video. There's a part of you
Mm,
that's always going to be like on for that.
yeah.
And then written word, again, there's no way to actually prove that was you writing it. And so a podcast, though, I mean, that's just you. That is the most real and authentic version of you that you can that you can like put out there.
Mm,
And so I think there's a really powerful legacy there. So I encourage someone if they're thinking about that. I mean, that's a way to make sure that your legacy exists and that it stays around and that it is you, and people can see that and get a lot of value from that.
yeah, absolutely. The other thing I love about a podcast is obviously I get to meet amazing people. I actually feel like I get a coaching session every time I do I like a recording like this because I'm sitting there and I'll go back and I'll watch it and I'll take notes myself. What do you think, from you as a host, what do you get out of hosting a podcast?
I get a free conversation with whoever I want.
Yeah.
I mean, that's honestly what it is. I mean, I find that's one of my best ways to find potential clients as well for my business. Someone who I think is interesting in what they're doing, someone who
Mm,
has some sort of coaching I may find benefit in. All those people, if there is anyone out there that I want to have a conversation with that's not over text, because let's be real, all the magic happens when you are actually talking to someone
yeah.
in real time, quote unquote face to face, even though we are, thousands of miles apart.
Yeah.
But that's what I use my podcast for. That is how I get my foot in the door. And
Mm,
I'd say if I'm reaching out to, let's say I'm reaching out to 10 people a day to get on the podcast, I'd say of the ones that actually read the message, because oftentimes a lot of people might not see the message, other people that read the message, I'd say I probably have like a 98% acceptance rate of people like agree, like, yeah, I'll be on the podcast, sure.
yeah.
Because I'm not trying to sell anyone anything. I'm just
Mm,
offering someone free marketing, which
mm,
essentially is what it is. And who's going to say no to that? And also, people definitely the ego exists at least to a certain level, and so everyone who wouldn't be flattered by someone inviting them to talk about themselves on their platform. And so if people say yes to coming on the podcast, they come on a podcast. I get an hour of their time, and we just chat,
mm.
and it's pretty much the same experience as if we just got on a call for no reason other than to have a conversation. It just happens to be recorded, and then I get some content too. So if that answers your question, it's really nice to get some free coaching, to get on the phone with some potential clients, and to meet some really amazing people in a way that doesn't feel very sleazy because I'm not selling anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love all of that. And I think I think that's what people miss out on the benefits of it and, don't understand that, as we all know, is that like as human beings, we crave connection. We crave it in, many different ways. And that's one of the ways that we can do it is on our podcast. And you get to connect with amazing people. And because of the brilliance of technology, like, we're on opposite sides of the world. And, it's literally just making sure that you've got time in your diary and that person's got time in their diary and you can make it happen.
Oh yeah, the crazy thing is, all of this is it's so value driven, and it's so from the heart,
Mm-hmm.
right? That people really, really open up to you when you invite them on a podcast. And so people I find open up to me when I invite them on my podcast. We have a really powerful conversation. I ask them genuinely, like, what can I, after we finish recording, I ask them, like, hey, so how can I use this episode to support you in your
Mm-hmm.
business? What can I do to support you? Like, I'm here for you. Who can I connect you with? What can I do? And a lot of times I get nothing, I'm good. But sometimes people, there'll be things I can do to help. But the thing is, I ask that, and then usually they'll turn around and say, "What about you? What can I do to help you?" And I
Mm-hmm.
said, "I really appreciate you asking. What made me want to start this podcast is I run a podcast production agency, and I give them the whole little spiel, and I just say, hey, do you know one person that you think would be looking for a service like that? A lot of times, maybe you get no, but I'll keep you in mind.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I hear the magic words, yeah, I do know someone. Or the even more magic words, yeah, as Obi-Wan Kenobi said, of course I know him. He's me. And so the person is like, yeah, I'm looking for exactly that. That's so crazy. And then boom,
Mm-hmm.
there's a new client. And there
Yeah.
was no hard sell. There was no pitch even really. I just shared what it is that I do in the same way that I just asked them to share with me what they do. And a lot of people really resonate with that. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of there's another benefit I find from podcasting.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is that, like when we are really authentic and we're sharing our stories, we've got that connection. Research has shown that you can actually 10x your like, no trust factor, which is, normally we have to have 21 to 25 touch points before you can make a sale. But having a conversation with somebody, and having that sort of, like you said, that intimate moment of being on a podcast, you actually are already 10xing that like no trust factor. And this is the benefit of like marketing as well for people that, I think a lot of businesses are missing out on. And this is one of the things I say, either be on a podcast, host your own podcast, because you can 10x that like no trust factor so much more quickly.
Because it's just you. I mean, it all comes down
Mm-hmm.
to, again, like what I said before a couple of times now.
Yeah.
It is you. It is the most authentic version of you. And people see that, and people I find really, really resonate with that, even if it's on like an unconscious emotional level.
Yeah.
If I open up and if I am myself, then the people I talk to I find also open up and also are themselves. And so it's almost an immediate connection. And those 25 touch points all happen, within a few minutes of being on the call. It feels like, right? And then we're like your
Absolutely.
best friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think what you're doing is amazing. I loved being on your podcast and, I'm so grateful for you to share your gifts with us today. And, I would love to ask you just a couple of quick questions. It's sort of a new thing that we're bringing into the podcast. So I would love to know, are you an Apple or Android person?
Android 100%.
Android? Okay, fabulous. Are you, well, obviously I'm going to probably know I've got Mac or are you a PC?
I definitely use PC.
PC, cool. And do you prefer the beach or do you prefer the forest?
Mm. Ooh, that is a really good question. I would probably, if I had to pick the beach. However,
Mhm.
they're both very close, and I'm very lucky to live in the beautiful California where I can access both anytime I want, sometimes even in the same day. So
Super
I
jealous.
don't really have to pick, but if I did, I'd pick beach.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cat or dog?
Cat. I love both, but again, if I had to pick, more of a cat person.
Hmm. Plane or ship?
Like to be on?
Hmm.
I've never taken a long boat journey, but I absolutely hate planes and flying on them, so I would pick ship.
Amazing. Amazing. And would you rather be an employee or an employer?
Let me think. Let me think. Yeah, no, employer. Being an employee sounds like
Right.
hell.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Evan. And we're going to pop all the links below how you can reach out to Evan. So, please, if you've got any questions for this episode, drop them below. We'll be responding to them as well. Thank you again, Evan, for being part of the show and sharing your gifts with us.
Thank you for hosting such an incredible show and giving so many people such a cool platform to share their passions. And I'm happy that I got to participate.
Oh, thank you. My absolute honor and pleasure. And I just want to thank everybody who has watched this episode today. Remember to live life to the fullest and to follow your passion. Love and light to you all.